If you think what the Chinese regime is doing to Uyghurs in Xinjiang is bad, wait till you hear what they've done to prepare for it. Hi, welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. They say history repeats itself, but that's not entirely true, at least not in China. Because for history to repeat itself, that implies that whatever horrible thing you're talking about stopped and then started anew. But under the Chinese Communist Party, horrible things have pretty much never stopped happening. I mean, if it's working for you, why change? Take, for instance, the persecution of the Uyghurs, the ethnic minority who live in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Yes, I know, it's called an autonomous region, not a province, but believe it or not, the people there are about as autonomous as people in the Tibet Autonomous Region, which is not autonomous. I think it might have something to do with all of Xinjiang's facial recognition surveillance, police stations on every corner, and the political re-education camps. And let's not forget the torture that makes death seem like a release. You know, I do love the Rockettes, but that may have been some unfortunately placed advertising. And while it's great that the rest of the world is finally beginning to take notice, this extreme form of monitoring and persecution in Xinjiang is not really new. It's just much more visible. Because the persecution of the Uyghurs is not just similar to what's happened in Tibet, it's also shockingly similar to what the Chinese Communist Party did to another group, Falun Gong. In fact, many of the tactics the party is now using against Uyghurs were perfected under the party's mass campaign to eradicate Falun Gong. That campaign started nearly 20 years ago, in 1999. Of course, Falun Gong is completely different from Islam. But the Communist Party doesn't care what your beliefs are. As long as you believe in something that's not party ideology, you're a threat. And Falun Gong's principles are truth, compassion, and tolerance. You can see why that's a threat to the party's ideology. Falun Gong is a spiritual practice that has similarities to Buddhism and Taoism. It became hugely popular in China during the 90s. At its peak, the Chinese government estimated there were 70 to 100 million people practicing it. And then they realized, wait, that means more people are practicing Falun Gong than are members of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it doesn't have to be a popularity contest, but if you're an authoritarian party state that spent decades suppressing and controlling any religion so that you, and only you, can control people's hearts and minds, you feel a little differently about these things, especially since many party members were also practicing Falun Gong. And so, the Chinese Communist Party leadership thought about why truth and compassion and tolerance were so popular, did some deep soul-searching, and decided to change their ways. I'm just kidding. They launched a bloody crackdown. In this episode, I can't really get into all the details of why Falun Gong was persecuted. So if you'd like to learn more, check out my episode, What is Falun Gong and Why is it Persecuted? The link is below. But there are a lot of similarities to what the Communist Party did to Falun Gong practitioners starting 20 years ago and what they're doing to Uyghurs in Xinjiang now. As award-winning China researcher Matthew Robertson says, this campaign against Falun Gong may have very well been the training model for what is now taking place in Xinjiang. Here are 5 ways the persecution of Falun Gong became the template for what the Communist Party is doing to Uyghurs today. Number 5. Propaganda. How do you convince a nation that torturing and detaining innocent people is a good idea? Propaganda. The first step in these mass campaigns is obviously to convince other Chinese citizens that the group being targeted is a dangerous threat to society. In the 90s, Chinese state-run media had been promoting Falun Gong, saying it provided health and mental benefits for millions. But in 1999, they quickly gave Falun Gong a new name, Evil Cult. And here's a website belonging to Xinhua, the official mouthpiece of the party. It's their landing page for Falun Gong-related articles. The skull really is a nice touch, along with a Microsoft Word chiller font. That makes it seem really scary. I guess Xinhua editors read a lot of R.L. Stine. Most of the anti-Falun Gong propaganda was more sophisticated than that, though. Chinese state-run media spent millions to create media articles and fake news events to make Falun Gong look dangerous and stupid, and also to erase all those older state-run news reports about Falun Gong's health benefits and how intellectuals practiced it. Whoops. The party is using similar propaganda tactics now against the Uyghurs. Uyghurs went from being one of the 56 happy ethnic minorities to being separatists, and then after 9/11, the most effective label, Muslim terrorists. Those re-education camps where Uyghurs are being tortured, why, they're just reforming religious extremists. This article from Xinhua Daily is called "Extremist Religion is Not Religion." And of course, the Chinese Communist Party always thinks of the children. Like in this school play where an evil Uyghur is being arrested. And here's a dance number called "Uphold Science, Deal with Evil Religions According to the Law." Hey, why are you leaving in the middle? Do you not want to learn how to deal with evil religions according to the law? That guy is definitely getting arrested. Number 4, weaponizing your beliefs. The Communist Party uses people's deeply held spiritual beliefs as a weapon against them. For Falun Gong practitioners, here's a good example. As the persecution intensified, Falun Gong practitioners went underground. And since all sorts of people practiced Falun Gong, from factory workers to lawyers to even party members, well, the Communist Party struggled to identify who still secretly practiced. As a way to root them out, they had major subway stations plaster pictures of the founder of Falun Gong on the ground. In Chinese culture, stepping on a picture of someone's face is extremely disrespectful. So if you stepped on the picture, you were allowed through. If you refused, you'd be put in jail. They've used similar tactics against Uyghurs who are Muslim. For example, the Communist Party has banned beards and veils, and restricted fasting during Ramadan. And shopkeepers are now required to stock cigarettes and alcohol, although that last one's not so much to make Muslims violate their beliefs. You see, persecuting people is hard work, and sometimes the Chinese police just need a cigarette and a stiff drink. Number 3, blame hostile foreign forces. The Chinese Communist Party wants you to know that Falun Gong practitioners or Muslims or whoever the victim du jour is, well, they're extremely dangerous. But also, they're definitely not more powerful than the party. So remember, kids, if there's some group undermining China's social harmony, you can bet there are hostile foreign forces at work behind the scenes. For example, there's this article in the totally trustworthy-sounding facts.org.cn that suggests Falun Gong is secretly funded by the CIA. Yes, the CIA has decided to stop running guns to Latin American rebels and start funding the world's most boring, nonviolent protests that attract almost no media attention. The party uses the same line about Uyghurs. Here's a People's Daily article saying, "We must be vigilant against foreign forces using religion to infiltrate and conspire to carry out the 4 transformations and splitism." And obviously, any claims that the party is mistreating the Uyghurs are also coming from anti-China forces. For good measure, any Tibetan protesters are funded by hostile foreign forces too. Because there's no way Tibetans could be genuinely upset about how they're treated by the Communist Party. And we'll be right back to show you how the party manipulates the law right after this quick commercial break. We're back, and it's time for number 2, manipulating the law. Even though these persecutions are done outside any form of rule of law, in recent years, the party has been creating legal justifications. And nothing says rule of law like a giant axe chopping Uyghurs into mincemeat. Who says re-education camps have to be illegal? I mean, if you control the government, you can make anything legal, like medieval torture. Now, I'm not going to detail all the insane methods the Communist Party has invented to torture Falun Gong practitioners, because YouTube would probably demonetize this video. But they're bad. The stories of torture from Xinjiang are only just beginning to come out. But I'm betting they will be very similar to what Falun Gong practitioners went through. And there's a reason for that. As Matthew Robertson says, the need to hit transformation rate targets set by higher-ups likely contributed to the level of brutality used against Falun Gong. And given that similar quotas are being dictated in Uyghur transformation work, security cadres may find that more violent methods are required to achieve their ends. And finally, number 1, re-education makes you less dumb. It's very important for everyone to remember, if you believe in anything besides communism, it's because you're dumb. See, according to state-run media, Chinese people who believe in Falun Gong or Christianity or Buddhism or Islam, well, they're all a bunch of uneducated simpletons. Hence the need for re-education. And it's all about learning to love the Chinese Communist Party. Ideological education is a major part of it. Reading communist doctrine and singing patriotic songs, all to help these misguided souls join the big socialist family. It's such a loving family that has killed 100 million people over 100 years, which in their defense is only an average of 1 million people a year. Now, comparing the persecution of the Uyghurs to Falun Gong practitioners isn't to diminish the suffering of either group, but there's a common misconception floating around in response to the situation in Xinjiang, that this shows how things in China are getting worse. Yes, it's absolutely bad now, but it's also been bad since the Communist Party's early days. From thought rectification in Yan'an to liberating Tibet, to the Cultural Revolution, to the Tiananmen Square Massacre, to killing Falun Gong practitioners, to now also oppressing Uyghurs. And that's still leaving out a lot. We could do an entire series on all the different groups of people the Chinese Communist Party has persecuted over the years. Wouldn't that be fun to watch? The Communist Party has never stopped persecuting people. They've just been refining their craft. The problem is systemic. We can't expect the Communist Party to fundamentally reform and become good. As long as it's around, there's always going to be another group that needs to be persecuted. Re-educated for a better, more harmonious society that loves the party. Gotta say that it's not looking too good for the Christians right now either. But the more people who are aware of what the Chinese Communist Party has been doing over the years, the more likely it is that someday all of the rightists, splitists, counter-revolutionaries, intellectuals, running dogs, separatists, religious extremists, and puppets of hostile foreign forces will see justice in China. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. And now I want to take a moment to answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Wesley Tucker asks, what can you offer in the way of hopeful insight that can assure your audience that we are not going to be living under a CCP world order in a matter of decades from now? Well, Wesley, I wish I could promise that. The Chinese Communist Party is doing everything it can to make a CCP world order happen, like by asserting its views at the United Nations, and waging a brazen and aggressive campaign of influence in Western democracies. That could be a very grim future. The good news is that people around the world, like you, are beginning to wake up and take action. U.S. officials have been speaking out about it more directly than ever. Australia has banned foreign campaign contributions because of concerns about Chinese Communist Party influence. And Canada, well, the Prime Minister is still hugging pandas, so there's some work to do. So stay educated by watching China Uncensored and share what you learn with your friends and family, especially if you live in Canada. Thanks for your question, Wesley. And if you want a shot at having your question answered on the show, contribute $1 or more per episode to China Uncensored by going to patreon.com/China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to know the truth about why the Communist Party went after Falun Gong, click this video. And on our podcast, China Unscripted, I sat down with Matthew Robertson to talk about this issue and how the Chinese Communist Party perfected its craft of persecution and media manipulation. Check it out, the link is below, or subscribe on iTunes. I'll see you in the comment section below.